Spitz. I'm a former IEEE webmaster. Here's some general information about me. Here's my 2 email addresses. My average response time is somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes if I'm awake. So unless I'm in class, I'm really fast to email if you have questions for me. The lecture slides are going to be posted to this website, and we're going to develop a website throughout the series. And that's going to be at this domain, which will be enabled tonight. So if you don't know what a domain is, we'll get to that too. And I'm hoping that this goes for about 4 weeks, about an hour and 20 minutes lecture. So my background, I've been a web developer now since 2002. I've probably been a web developer longer, but I don't remember. I've developed in PHP and MySQL environments mostly, but I've done a lot of ASP.NET too. I typically use XHTML strict, although HTML5 is the new standard that's coming out, although it won't be finalized until 2017. Most browsers and Google are pushing it, so that's basically what this web lecture is going to be about. I'm in my final semester here, completing a BSMS degree. I'm considering either a PhD or there's a potential interview that I'm going to next week, and I might even work for Google, so I don't know yet. I've developed lots of personal websites. I have an extensive portfolio. I currently run a hosting company for websites. There's about 30 people on my hosting company right now, and I maintain lots and lots of servers. So why am I doing this lecture? I enjoy sharing knowledge with other people. I'm a teaching assistant. I signed up to be a TA because I enjoy teaching it. So I've got I need experience in communicating technical knowledge at a not so technical level because I tend to overspeak what most of my friends know. And if you don't understand me, the chances are that nobody else will understand me either. So stop me, ask me what I'm doing. I typically go way above and beyond what normally is required. And of course, I need feedback on how I do. So let's just jump right in and figure out what is a browser. Well, a browser is the program on your computer that allows you to see a website. So you use Google Chrome, Internet Explorer, Firefox, Safari, Opera, there's lots of others. Right now, I recommend Chrome. Even though Firefox is the most popular because Chrome is the fastest browser out there. And it's by Google, and it's just kind of entered the landscape for browsers. But it's quickly jumping up in popularity, and right now my website lists Firefox as most popular, Google Chrome second. So why do we need a browser? I think I already covered this a little bit, but we need a browser to surf the internet. Without the browser, we can't connect to other websites. And browsers use something called HTML, which is Hypertext Markup Language, and that's basically how we communicate data from the server to the client, and we put data up on a website. It's what all web pages are written in. And the browsers are really good at parsing HTML, and this course will jump really deep into HTML. The server is modifying HTML before it's printed out to the page. We usually have a programming language in there. Programming languages that modify HTML before we output to the screen are PHP, JSP, which is Java Server Pages, ASP, which is Active Server Pages by Microsoft, and there's lots of others. How does the browser communicate with the server? Well, the internet is a huge network. It stretches worldwide. IP version 4, which can handle 4 billion computers at a time, was just completed not too long ago. So the internet's rapidly growing. We're moving into the new standard of IP, which we'll be able to hold. And the new version of IP can pretty much address every grain of sand on the earth. So that's how many addresses we have. I don't think we'll ever come up with that many computers ever, so I think we're good for a long time with the new IP. But when your browser requests a page, first we have to do a couple things. We do DNS lookups, which is basically a way that we convert something like www.google.com into an IP address so that your browser knows where to go on the internet to get to a website. IP addresses are similar to your house address. So, for example, I live at 4499 Humphrey Road, Great Valley, New York, 14741. An IP address to a computer using IP version 4 might be 208.67.222.222, which is actually the IP address of OpenDNS. So basically, your browser converts a domain name like www.google.com into its actual IP address, and then it knows how to get to the server because IP address is the way that we can communicate to the server over the internet. And I will leave all the protocols that I make as a black box. It's magic, it works. So this web lecture series is going to attempt to teach HTML5 and PHP, maybe a little bit of MySQL towards the end. I tend to use HTML4, so I'm going to probably stumble a little bit when it comes to the 5 standard. Most everything is the same in HTML5, except for it adds a lot of new stuff that allows for video streaming and stuff. And YouTube's starting to move towards HTML5 quickly. Older browsers probably aren't going to support YouTube much longer if they move away from Flash, which is the current way of serving videos. And also, my examples tend to be valid HTML. There's a website called validator.w3.org, and that's a very helpful website for if you're trying to produce proper HTML, because HTML is very forgiving. You make an error or something in it, it's just, the browser will just parse over it, it'll forget that there's even an error there, it won't throw any warnings, and it'll just make the page load. If you validate your HTML code, what happens is your website's going to look more uniform across all browsers because Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer, and Opera all have different ways of showing the same code or HTML on the browser and making it look different. So validating is kind of important. So Internet Explorer 6 is kind of out of the scope of this discussion now because only 2% of the world use it, and hopefully none of you use it. Internet Explorer 6 is the worst browser to develop HTML for because it shows web pages completely different from what the standard is. Chrome, Firefox, Safari, and Opera all follow standards that the validator can validate. So they tend to show things a lot closer to what you would expect if you're putting together a bunch of HTML. And before standards were widely followed, browsers were really good at detecting errors in your code, so they wouldn't throw errors and they would just show something. So if you go to Google or Yahoo and try to validate those sites, chances are they don't validate. I actually checked about 3 weeks ago and they don't. And that's just because they do extensive testing and they make sure that their websites load on all uniform browsers. Focus is on CSS. CSS is how we make a style for a web page. It's how we give it colors, how we position things on the web page, and overall it makes it look pretty. Without CSS, we have to go back to an old HTML standard, which kind of couples your code and your information in HTML with the design of the document. So CSS just abstracts the design away from the HTML, so it cleans up your code in the web page. Focus on design. Although I'm not the best designer in the world, I'm going to attempt to show you a little bit about Photoshop CS5 at some point, probably the next lecture. And I'll probably show a pre-made template and how you might want to modify it, and then I'll go into how to extract the elements out of the template using CSS and putting them onto a website to make your website look pretty. Because CSS alone isn't going to help you make a really pretty website. PHP and MySQL is very, very prominent in web development. It runs on pretty much every server that I know, even Microsoft supports it now. So PHP is a pre-hypertext processor or hypertext preprocessor. I've seen it both ways. MySQL is structured query language, and SQL is database language, which means that you store a tremendous amount of data into a database, and then PHP is language that will go to the database, grab the data, and then it will display it onto the page using CSS, and it'll output HTML. So CSS and HTML will still make it into a picture with PHP. It's very useful for dynamic websites like your blog or Facebook uses PHP. So I'll get into it. Those lectures, I would suggest that you have a lot of programming knowledge. PHP is very forgiving with programming, but it isn't perfect like HTML, to where if you make one little tiny error, it's going to forgive you because it won't. It'll throw out an error and say that it can't run this program. So enough generalized information. Here's a bunch of HTML. This is actually HTML5. So basically HTML, we have first at the top a doc type specification. And this tells the browser that we're serving a certain kind of document, because there's all sorts of different languages that can be interpreted. HTML is common for websites. And then we have to put tags called HTML and the /HTML on either end of where we're going to put our website data. The slash here just means close out HTML or stop the HTML language. Then inside, typically we have head tags. Notice how I indented so that parts of the document are further in. This helps you tell which blocks are which. So notice that there's a body and a closing to the body. Remember that the slash always closes. There are exceptions, but we'll get to those. So in the head, that's where all your information goes. It tells you a little bit about what the web page is going to display. It tells you maybe what the character encoding is on the website. We have lots of ways to encode language into computers. So we have ASCII, there's other ones out there. UTF-8 is an international standard where we can make all sorts of characters appear on the web page. So this here is usually required for any kind of web page, and there's a lot of different meta tags that give you metadata or data about your web page. Then you have a title, and then inside the title, that is